Hi, I'm Tracey Masella, and you are watching Straight Talk with Tracey. Thank you for joining us. Today I am going to be speaking with Dr. Erin Clyfield, who is the Program Director of the Eating Disorder Program at Silver Hill Hospital. Thank you for joining us, Erin.
Thank you for having me.
Lots to discuss regarding eating disorders. I wanted to focus today on body image and how particularly our youth can develop in these times of social media a healthy body image. Big question.
Yes.
So let's start by defining what is considered a healthy body image.
Okay. Great question. And I guess first we can think about how we would define body image in general. So body image, I would say, is really a sense of one's body. It's the mental image and the feelings one has, thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, a sense of one's body in space and how it feels and how it looks. And so it's really a sense of one's body and again, the attitude and what it means to have the particular body you have. So a healthy body image, I think, is pretty much having an accurate appraisal of what your body looks like, what it feels like, how it is seen, so you have an accurate sense of what it means to be in your body, as well as, and I think this is important, acceptance of your body as it is, including imperfections, flaws, because our bodies are designed to be imperfect. So it's also allowing yourself to have the body you have, imperfections and all, accepting those, and also along with that, I think what's important is not defining one's self-worth and identity by your body image. So, it's all of that. It's knowing your body, accepting your body as it is, and not defining your entire being and your self-worth and identity based on that body image. That's a healthy body image.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. It's a tall order.
Yeah. So developmentally, when do we as human beings begin to have a perception or an idea of how our body is in relationship to the world and to our identity?
Right. I mean, I think it happens really pretty early on, and actually younger and younger, you see younger kids really getting bullied by their bodies, but I would say it's, sort of late, elementary school, usually 5th grade or so, kids are starting to really be aware of their bodies. They're starting to have a sense of how they measure up relative to their peers, and the sense of whether they're being accepted. And so even as early as 5th grade, I'd say, is when people start to have a sense of, ooh, I'm different from my peers, and I want to be more like them, and they start to think about themselves in terms of their bodies, not just who they are as people anymore,
And that corresponds, I would imagine, to the beginning of puberty.
Exactly.
Which is wreaking havoc on their bodies anyway. So they're going through, it's a huge period of transition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a time of incredible vulnerability. I mean, kids at that age, again, identity, hormones, that's wreaking havoc with their sense of themselves. Their bodies are starting to change, and for many kids they will say, I felt betrayed by my body. My body used to be like this, now I don't feel like I have a sense of control over what it's doing and how it's maturing. And so they are really vulnerable at a time when they're starting to become more socially aware and how they're perceived and seen by the opposite sex. And so they're starting to change, and they're more vulnerable at a time when it has more meaning than ever, and more importance in terms of their identity.
Right, and the challenges are greater.
The challenges are greater, and again, the confusion is greater. They're starting to think more about themselves, their identities, who am I? And again, the hormones are flaring up, and they don't have as much control over their emotions, and all kinds of things are flaring up at a time, again, when their bodies are changing and they're more vulnerable than ever.
Right. Now, with the advent of social media, which we are taking advantage of here today.
Yes, for the good.
For the good, I hope. Yes, that's our goal.
Yeah.
How has social media changed this developmental period for our kids?
Yeah, it's a great question and a really important one. Well, before social media, even media generally,
Yeah.
I mean, what happens with media is that it tends to distort, and it's presenting a certain image. And I think media, has been sort of designed to sell products and to sell images. So it is based on unrealistic and unattainable images. So, you find that, again, we take those kids who are vulnerable and susceptible to these messages, and then we have the media who are presenting these biased, distorted, unrealistic images, and these kids are vulnerable to that, and they think, oh gosh, if I could just look like that, the beauty myth, the ideal, then I'd be happy too. It's the beauty myth, happiness equals thinness, and so they become vulnerable, not realizing that these images are distorted and unrealistic and unattainable. So, media has preyed on that in general. Now take social media, and it's like the media on steroids. Because what are kids?
Instant access.
Instant access, and those pictures are designed to present an image. I mean, I laugh. Kids take pictures, and then they spend 3 hours deciding which one. Is it this angle? Is it that angle?
Right.
Let's see, my chin is up on this, oh no, we've got to retake, so, 300 more pictures to find that one that's just perfect, just right. And so we see how distorted it is in terms of what's real. The reality of how we look as people. Nobody wants to be vulnerable. I mean, when was the last time somebody posted a picture on social media of lying in bed without makeup, sad, depressed, alone, although some do that, but the majority are presenting that perfect moment. I'm laughing, I'm smiling, and kids see that, and again, they think about their reality, which is perhaps more realistic. Sometimes I feel sad, sometimes I'm happy. They see those and they think, oh, if I just look like that and I do what they're doing, I'll have that same outcome. Not recognizing how posed and polished it is and unrealistic.
Right. And yes, so the selfie generation, capturing a moment in time which has been well manicured to portray a particular moment.
Exactly.
While life is passing by.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, yeah.
So how tied is body image to eating habits? So when we think about eating disorders or disordered eating, because in my opinion, I've never met an adolescent that doesn't have disordered eating of some type. And we'll get into later how to discern between disordered eating and an eating disorder. Is body image tied directly to eating habits or a sense of how we are in relationship to food?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the cornerstones of eating disorders is preoccupation with body image and concern about body image and controlling and managing weight. So for the majority of people who have eating disturbances and eating disorders or disordered eating, it's generally revolving around body image and their choices of food to maintain or sustain a certain body image. It's a little more complex because it's also how certain foods may feel. I mean, for example, I met with somebody yesterday who was overeating on healthy foods. Nonetheless, she was gaining weight, but she had this mistaken idea that because these are healthy foods, it's okay to be eating a lot of them in abundance, and that's a misconception that because this is diet food, I can eat. It was kind bars, but she was overeating on them, so they were still being used for emotional eating. But the point is that a lot of times people are making their decisions about what to eat, and what I say, it's kind of mind. The mind is making the decision rather than listening to the body. So the mind is asking, well, if I eat this, what effect will it have on my weight? So it really is the mind determining the shoulds, the shouldn'ts. I should eat this, I shouldn't. Why should you or shouldn't you? Because it will have ultimately an effect on my weight, controlling my weight and my body image. So again, it's being used in the service of weight control, and again, to design a certain body, to sculpt a certain shape.
Right, right. And you talked earlier about a fact-based perception of your body. So being able to look in the mirror and see the strengths and the weaknesses, the beauty and the flaws. How does a child develop that?
Well, and you know what's interesting about that is that for most people there are body image distortions. When people look in a body in a mirror,
Right.
they don't necessarily see their body as others see it.
Correct,
There's going to
yeah.
be biases and distortions, and I think it's important for people to realistically know that, to say, you know, what I'm seeing may not be the truth in a sense, with a capital T. And again, that's why I really want to emphasize the meaning of that. What does that mean to you? What's the importance of that in terms of your self-worth? Can I look in the mirror and say whether I'm seeing it realistically or not, that's my body, you know, yeah, that's a little imperfect and that is too, and I'm going to go about my day. So be it. You know, not that this will now define me. I'm going to get back into bed and pull the covers over my head, or I can't go to a party on Friday night because, you know, there's this or that and it's not quite right. So it's putting it in perspective.
Right.
It's saying, okay, you know, yes, less than perfect, and now I go about my day.
So the level of impairment we measure to say how much does a distorted body image impair our daily functioning?
Absolutely.
Right,
yes.
right.
The degree to which it's interfering with my functioning, interfering with my happiness. Yeah.
Okay, great. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about disordered eating, eating disorders, and also what parents can do to support their kids through that developmental puberty body change time.
For 1 in 4 Americans, mental illness hits close to home. And since 1931, Silver Hill Hospital has also been close to home. For individuals and families facing the challenges of mental illness, Silver Hill offers a highly trained, compassionate staff that provides state-of-the-art care in a beautiful and private setting. If mental health issues hit close to home, remember, there's a world-class psychiatric hospital right in the neighborhood.
Welcome back to Straight Talk with Tracey. I'm here today with Dr. Erin Clyfield, the program director for the Eating Disorder Program at Silver Hill Hospital. Thanks again for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
We took a little snack during the break and for some emotional eating, right?
Right.
So that phrase, emotional eating, leads us to a discussion about eating habits. What is disordered? What becomes problematic? What needs treatment?
Right.
How does a parent discern?
Right. So I know we've had conversations in terms of, you know, the dialectics of overly pathologizing normal eating or normalizing, you know, pathological eating. And I think especially in teenagers that's difficult to discern because oftentimes they are very chaotic and scattered and all over the place with their eating and not just having a stable pattern of eating. But I think what's important here is just that when is it a problem? I mean, and how do we know it's a problem? And the problem is in the eye of the beholder. Is this a problem for me? You know, some people can have French fries at 3 o'clock and then run out the door and go shoot hoops and they don't care. Another person is having French fries at 3 o'clock and going up into their room and feeling very guilty and very sad and very upset. So it is, I think what's important for parents to be thinking about are patterns and clusters and changes in behavior. So is this a departure from what my child used to be doing? And do I see patterns emerging? So, for example, you know, a kid runs out the door, I skipped breakfast, and that can be very common with many kids. But did my child skip breakfast, then comes home and says, oh, you know, I'm not hungry, I ate lunch, I'm not hungry now, and then is shuffling food around at dinner and seems more withdrawn and more depressed, and then goes up to her room and is isolating and doesn't seem to be socializing with her friends as much. I mean, again, you look for the big picture here, and this was my child who used to be running outside and had lots of friends and phone calls, and now she's isolating and seems more withdrawn and more depressed and more anxious. Again, the patterns, and used to have carbohydrates at every meal, and now say, no, I don't want the potato for dinner. So we look for the patterns, we look for their changes in behavior, and to really sense whether this is becoming a problem. Now it gets even more tricky because for many kids, they don't want to admit it. They don't want to acknowledge that this is a problem.
Sure.
And they're saying, because at some level it's serving an adaptive function. As much as it's creating problems in their lives, they also start to feel like it is solving problems. Again, this is what I need to do for my self-esteem. I need to control my weight. And as much as it's really affecting their mood and their functioning, they don't want to give it up. It's what we call egosyntonic. For others who might be binging and purging, it's very shame-based. So again, they don't want to acknowledge or admit, I'll start tomorrow, I'll get it under control tomorrow. I just, I can do this on my own. I don't want anyone to know about this. So in either case, they may be dissembling and being deceptive. They don't, in denial. They don't want to acknowledge or admit this is a problem. So that can make it even trickier for parents who suspect or see changes in these behaviors.
It is similar to other problematic behaviors such as self-injury. Is there that emotional release when either from restricting or from purging?
Oh, absolutely.
Or binging?
Absolutely, and that's a good point. And I know I mentioned earlier emotional eating.
Yeah.
So people have a propensity either to turn toward food or away from food, often as a way of managing emotions.
Coping.
That's really a huge piece to it. Absolutely. Coping with difficult emotions that they just don't want to feel.
Right.
That's like we're hardwired as human beings not to feel pain. We don't want to feel discomfort. So we'll do anything we can, from screaming in our cars to...
I don't know anyone who does that.
Right. Any number of things and ways to not have to feel pain.
Right.
And so the food becomes a major coping mechanism. Again, turning toward food as a way of numbing or avoiding or escaping some emotion they don't want to feel, or restricting. Now also, interestingly, with binging and purging also is a huge release, huge anxiety release. So whether somebody binges in order to purge, part of it is because they want to purge in order to get that anxiety reduction.
That feeling, right.
Or restricting. People will talk a lot about how restricting helps to numb their emotions. So in the same way, whether the problem behavior is self-harm, many people will also say when they're prevented from self-harm, they start to restrict.
to eating.
Exactly.
Right.
Because again, they've got to find some way to manage what feels intolerable to them.
Yeah. Now, I have always been, and it could be because of the way I was raised, a big proponent of family dinner, at least a couple of times a week. And I always thought a bit about it from the perspective of being able to check in with your kids and your spouse or partner. How much does eating with your child influence their eating habits? Particularly in the teen years when it's difficult to get everybody to sit down at table.
Right. Well, that opens a whole other can of worms, actually, and an important one. Not a can of spaghetti, but a can of worms.
Doesn't sound good.
Right. No. Interestingly, I mean, there's a lot of thoughts I have about this. My first thought was, when you sit down, if a child is already preoccupied with body image and food, you'll notice that they're not available at the meals anymore, that they're self-absorbed. They are preoccupied, so they're not as available for the conversation and for the whole sense of joining together and attachment and the affiliation. I mean, think about it. When people come over to your house, where do you end up gravitating?
Kitchen.
The kitchen.
Of course, right.
It's warm, it's inviting, it's and it's food-based, and it's a way of celebrating life. So you could see the light starts to go out in the child's eyes. They're pushing it away. They're in a struggle. They're having a battle within themselves. I want to eat. I don't want to eat. I mostly don't want to eat right now. And they're not available for the family discussion. But also important in the question you asked, it's not just the family meals. And this gets back to how to help our kids. is to check in. Parents need to check in with their own attitudes
Right.
about body and weight and food and healthy eating and because again, in my mind, healthy eating is balanced and flexible. Now, many people in our society have a different view of that, right? Healthy means it's kale and quinoa, right? And so again, our message, the very important message is balance and flexibility, and
Right.
all foods fit. We need to know that everything in moderation is okay, and that's a healthy lifestyle. So one of the important things is when we're having that family meal, I want to know that there is balance on that table and that there is conversation. And again, for parents to really check in with their own belief system. Do they themselves believe that happiness equals thinness? Their own belief in that, in the message, worthiness is about body image, and many parents will fall prey to those same
Right.
messages. So they need to be careful in the messages they're conveying to their kids.
Right. So it's not just social media that's giving these messages. If a young girl loses weight, she gets a lot of feedback, I think, from her family and peers certainly as well. It's not just social
Absolutely.
media, but hey, you look great. Wow, did you
Yes.
lose weight?
Hugely.
Conversely, if a child gains weight, they might get a negative response to that. Ooh, maybe you shouldn't hit the French fries so hard.
Absolutely, absolutely. The messages at home are so important. And, again, back to what you had raised earlier about the time of puberty when bodies are changing, to remember that kids are hugely sensitive to that around that time. They're struggling with it. They're having their own struggles and emotional crises over, my God, my pants aren't fitting the same way. What is this? What's happening? What's changing? And for boys, too, the pressure's in the other direction, what we call bigorexia, which is, am I big enough? Do I have enough muscles?
Sure.
Where's my six-pack? I mean, so in both sides, to call a boy a wimp or to say to a girl, ooh, I'm seeing some changes there, even if it's, well-meaning teasing, you've got to realize how sensitive the kids are, and this is not something to tease about.
Right.
Because they are having such a struggle with it themselves.
Right.
So again, the messages from the family that puberty, that the changes in body, this is completely normal, and to see it as a positive, kind of way in which you're maturing, you're growing, any ways to frame it where the child can feel better about it. Certainly not to inflame the sense of fear and anxiety around it. And it's amazing how many parents will, in fact, inflame the fear and anxiety. And there was a great article, actually, a few years ago by Brene Brown in the New York Times about how parents were actually suggesting to their girls to hike their skirts up a little bit. I mean, legitimately, maybe that's why you're not getting the attention from boys. I mean, giving these messages that are really falling prey to what are negative, unhealthy messages for children.
Right. So, yeah, it begins at home.
Oh, absolutely.
During that
begins at
time.
home.
So
Yeah.
how does a parent begin to talk to a teen that they suspect might be going through some difficulty with eating, body image, that sort of thing? How do you begin that conversation?
Right. Well, so again, I'll answer that in a few different ways. By expressing a concern about what you're seeing in terms of changes in behaviors. In DBT we talk about mindfulness, observe, describe, non-judgmentally, and really huge on the non-judgmentally.
Yeah, so non-judgmental for our lay folks is not an opinion, it's a judgment. A judgment is when we categorize something as good or bad.
Right.
So you can say, I like ice cream, which is an opinion,
Right.
or judgmentally you can say, ice cream is terrible.
Right.
So categorizing something into good and bad.
Exactly, thank you. And so I see you're spending a lot of time in your room by yourself. Now again,
Fact-based.
Fact-based, and
Right.
it may be good, it may be bad.
That's
She may
right.
be in there studying away for her SATs and great, because she's been needing to do that for a while. Again, we don't have a judgment, we don't know, but I see that this has been a change. I saw that you were out with your friends a lot, first semester, and I see that you're spending a lot more time by yourself. I'm concerned. You know, I statements express what you feel, what you're seeing, and your concern about it, and expect denial, expect a rebuttal. I'm fine, I'm okay, one-word answers.
Where does the parent go then?
Well, you know, and again, I think it's important for parents to really be aware, to be reading up, to be apprised, to be knowledgeable about what to expect, and that denial and resistance is part and parcel of the problem. You know,
So that might be a clue that things are as a parent's gut might suspect.
Exactly, exactly. So I think parents need to start looking into professional help, getting their own help in terms of how to manage this, seeking out professionals who know about eating disorders, and stay the course. Don't back down. Stay on it, you know, because you don't want to let it go. It's a kind of the dialectic. You don't want to be, you know, knocking on their door 24/7,
Right.
and you know, badgering at the same time. You don't want to bury your head in the sand.
Right.
Be appropriately apprised and aware and knowledgeable about what's going on, and seek out professional help. You know, ask questions. You know, ask people. You know, how do I ask questions? And again, be aware of the signs and the changes in your child.
So what are the resources for kids to look to using social media to how to boost their self-image, their body image, to start to turn away from those unrealistic expectations of the supermodels and look more towards a healthy or adaptive body image, accepting?
Right, right. You know, so I think it's important for parents to kind of teach media literacy, you know, to help their kids understand how unattainable these images are and how unrealistic and polished and manicured. There was a great, it just reminded me of Jamie Lee Curtis many, many years ago, was brave enough to come through and be vulnerable and to show. There was a picture of her, you know, photoshopped and airbrushed and all of this of what she looked like, and then a picture of how she really looks. And she said, this is the reality of who I am. So folks, don't believe what you see, you know, on the screen. And that was a beautiful moment,
Right.
and it doesn't happen. So for parents to teach their kids to think critically, to think, you know, skeptically about these images, not to buy into those myths. At the same time, there's a lot in terms of promoting healthy body image. It's exploring personal values and goals. You know, what are my hobbies? What are my interests? How do I define myself as a whole person? Not me as defined by my body, but who am I? What matters to me? Where are my passions? Where are my interests? What do I care about in life? One of the things I love to do with my residents is I ask them, what do you look for in other people? You know, what matters to you about other people? What are those qualities? What are the personality characteristics? I've never had a person tell me that they look for the size of a person's calves. I've never once heard that.
That's right.
Right? You know, I base my friendship on calf muscles. No, you know, it's loyalty, it's friendship. We have fun together. I can count on this person. They care about me. You know, I know they have my back. Well, that's what matters about you too. And so we do a lot of work around that, but what really forms attachments? What's important in relationships and attachments? So I try to get them to see those qualities in themselves as well. You know, also things like looking in the media and look at the various people that you may admire and respect. And again, look for the varieties of shapes and sizes out there and how they come in all kinds of packages, and you'll be really surprised to see that the thing that matters to you is how they smile or the light in their eyes. When you really tune into your own wisdom, you recognize that that's really what's important, and that's probably what's important about me as well. So those are the kinds of things. Now at the same time, I have to say that taking care of one's body and finding the flexibility and the balance in the middle path is also important, because You know, you don't want to go from one extreme to another. If there's one thing you'll hear me say very much, very often, is the dialectic, the balance.
Right.
Balance and flexibility. We don't want either extreme. So I
Right.
don't want you just sitting on the sofa doing nothing either, because that's not in your best
Right.
interest. I also don't want you at the gym for 6 hours a day, but where's the middle path? And it's like, look for the 3 F's, the fun, friendship, and fitness. You know, find the things about activities, do it for the right reasons, because I do feel good when I do it. So either extreme will foster obsessive preoccupation. So healthy self-esteem comes from good self-care. You know, yeah.
Should parents set rules or expectations about the amount of exercise that a child should get?
I don't think so. I don't think that, you know, it's kind of like the rules of, you know, I mean, unfortunately what happens for many children is they set their own rules, and then the rules become more extreme. I mean, I think if we listen to ourselves and we learn to tune in, just like with food, that you can't have this, should have that, shouldn't have that, same thing with exercise, you know, rules can become very rigid. Now, that's not to say that, you know, having a realistic expectation, or to say that this is what we would hope for you, or what, you know, we feel would be in your best interest. But if it becomes a rule, I think it then becomes something that a child
It's punishable.
might... Exactly. And then can become extreme. If it's more, you know, again, motivated by self-care, but for someone who is, you know, not moving at all, again, you know, I would say it like this, though: let's go for a family walk. You know, or for a bike ride or something where it doesn't, you know, like I want to say maybe a seamless way, you know, where it's not set as a rule, but kind of a way in which we now as a family are all, you know, trying to, again, fun, fitness, friendship, and affiliation. So I wouldn't couch it as a rule, but can be kind of a seamless way in which we are trying to promote healthful habits.
Yeah. So peers are often the first line of defense. They are often the first people that recognize whether a kid is having a problem, because as adolescents move through adolescence, they move away from their parents being the people that they look to for definitions, for values, for identity, and they move more towards their peer group. So if a peer suspects that one of their friends is struggling with eating, they notice that they're going to the bathroom after every meal, that they're skipping meals, that they might become aware that they're actually purging. What would a peer do?
You know, and this is such an important question, and one that I have answered for many kids, because what happens is many kids feel that they're betraying their friend, and I say absolutely not. You're saving your friend, because the more an eating disorder goes on, the more entrenched and intractable it becomes. So again, we don't want to bury our heads in the sand, and we also don't want to be, you know, strangulating the person, because that's it's ineffective to do that, to, you know, to come on heavy-handed with the individual who's struggling. You want to find people you can talk to about it. You know, I often say find that one safe person you can go to who you know will hear and listen. You've got to find the professionals in this. And again, back to the question of what does a parent do, because we need to expect denial. We need to expect the resistance. We expect that the person is not going to come forward and say, "Yep,
I need help.
yeah, guilty as charged, and I'm binging and purging every day, or I've been restricting." No, I'm fine. I don't need help. You've got it all wrong. As you know, their friend runs to the bathroom after every meal in the cafeteria. Their friends do know. You've got to talk to people. You know. You go to whomever you feel safe going to, who you feel will listen, can hear you, and the fears of, well, what if this gets back to my friend? I say, put that aside. That may get back to your friend. You're saving her life or his life. And stay the course. Don't back down from this. If your gut is telling you they're having a struggle, you follow your gut, you stay on it. You know, and at the same time try to be effective in the way you're doing it. find the right people, keep the dialogue going. Same thing as, you asked with parents,
Right.
same thing. It's not obvious oftentimes, and it really depends on the individual how to speak with them. What's something they can hear, but stay on it.
Seek help.
Seek help. Don't back down.
Right. Thank you so much useful information on such a important topic in our culture today. We will have resources available on our website as well as on this podcast. So if people are looking for help, we will provide some sources for help. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining me for Straight Talk with Tracey. If you have questions, or there is a topic you would like us to discuss, or someone in your community has something to say about mental health, please email your ideas to askthedoctor@silverhillhospital.org. We'll see you next month.